Elena Martinez wiped down the last table at Cafe Luna, her small coffee shop nestled in the heart of downtown. The clock on the wall showed 9:47 p.m., and she was finally ready to close. Today had been her 25th birthday, but like many other days in the past 2 years, she had spent it working alone. The cafe was her life now, the only thing she had left after her father's sudden death. She flipped the sign to "Closed" and began counting the day's earnings. It wasn't much, but it would cover the rent for another month. Elena had been struggling to keep the business alive ever since she inherited it. Her father had been the heart and soul of Cafe Luna, knowing every customer's name and their favorite order. Elena was still learning, still trying to fill shoes that seemed too big for her. As she locked the cash register, a gentle knock came at the front door. Elena looked up to see a woman in an expensive coat standing outside, her breath visible in the cold evening air. The woman appeared to be in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back elegantly and kind eyes that reminded Elena of her grandmother. Against her better judgment, Elena unlocked the door. "I'm sorry, but we're closed for the night." "I know, dear," the woman said with a warm smile. "I was hoping I could speak with you for just a moment. My name is Isabella Romano. I knew your father very well." Elena's heart skipped. Very few people had mentioned her father lately, and she found herself stepping aside to let the stranger in. "You knew Papa?" Isabella nodded as she entered the cozy cafe. "Victor was a good man. He helped my family many years ago when we were new to this country. I heard about his passing, and I've been meaning to come by." Elena offered Isabella a seat at one of the small round tables near the window. The older woman's presence was oddly comforting, and Elena found herself wanting to hear stories about her father that she had never heard before. "He never mentioned you," Elena said, settling into the chair across from Isabella. "But then again, Papa was always private about his friendships outside the cafe." Isabella's eyes grew distant. "Your father was more than a friend to my family. When my son was young and getting into trouble with the wrong crowd, Victor talked sense into him. He probably saved my boy's life." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. Even after his death, she was still learning about the good her father had done for others. "That sounds like something he would do." "I came here tonight because I wanted to make you an offer," Isabella said, her voice becoming more serious. "I can see you're struggling to keep this place running. The neighborhood has changed, and small businesses like this one are having a hard time." Elena's cheeks reddened. Was her financial situation that obvious to strangers? She tried to maintain her composure. "We're doing fine, thank you." Isabella reached across the table and gently touched Elena's hand. "There's no shame in accepting help, dear. My family has done well for itself, and we never forgot what your father did for us. I'd like to pay off the remaining debt on this building and help you renovate. Consider it a birthday gift." Elena's mouth fell open. "How did you know it was my birthday?" "Your father used to talk about you all the time. He was so proud of his little girl born on November 23rd. Isabella's smile was genuine and motherly. "He would have wanted someone to look after you." Tears began forming in Elena's eyes. The debt on the building was crushing her, and she had been considering selling the cafe just to escape it. "I can't accept such a generous gift from someone I just met." "You're not accepting it from a stranger," Isabella said firmly. "You're accepting it from family. Your father was family to us." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The offer seemed too good to be true, but Isabella's sincerity was undeniable. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because good people like your father are rare in this world," Isabella replied. "And good people deserve to have their legacies protected." Elena looked around the cafe, imagining it restored to its former glory. New equipment, fresh paint, maybe even expanding the menu. It could work. It could really work with the right support. "There is one condition," Isabella added, her tone becoming slightly more formal. I'd like you to cater a private family dinner next week. Nothing too elaborate, just some of your coffee and pastries for about 20 people. Elena nodded eagerly. Catering could become a new revenue stream for the business. Of course, I'd be happy to. Isabella stood up and smoothed her coat. Wonderful. I'll have my assistant contact you with the details tomorrow. And Elena? Yes? Happy birthday, dear. Your father would be so proud of the strong woman you've become. After Isabella left, Elena sat alone in her cafe, feeling like her entire world had shifted. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful about the future. She had no way of knowing that Isabella Romano was the mother of the most powerful crime boss in the city, or that the simple catering job would change her life forever. Elena locked up the cafe and walked to her small apartment 3 blocks away. The November air was crisp, but she felt warm inside. Tomorrow, she would start planning the catering menu and maybe even look into getting estimates for the renovations Isabella had mentioned. As she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, Elena noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when she left the cafe. Through the tinted windows, she could barely make out the silhouette of a person sitting in the driver's seat. She paused on the steps, a small chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the weather. The car's engine started, and it slowly pulled away from the curb. Elena shook her head, telling herself she was being paranoid. It was probably just someone waiting to pick up a friend from one of the nearby bars. Inside her apartment, Elena made herself a cup of tea and sat at her small kitchen table with a notebook. She began writing down ideas for the Romano family dinner. Italian pastries, she thought, rich coffee blends, maybe some small sandwiches and appetizers. She had no idea that while she planned her menu 3 floors below in the basement of a building across town, Isabella Romano was having a very different conversation with her son. The girl agreed to the catering job, Isabella said. Standing in the doorway of a luxurious office decorated with dark wood and expensive artwork. Behind the massive desk sat a man in his 30s, his dark hair perfectly styled and his suit clearly custom-made. Despite his young age, there was something dangerous in his eyes, something that suggested he was not a man to be crossed. Good, he replied without looking up from the documents he was reviewing. And you're certain she doesn't know anything about her father's real relationship with our family? Isabella shook her head. Victor kept his word. She believes he was just a cafe owner who helped us years ago. The man finally looked up, and his expression softened slightly when he saw his mother. You did well tonight, Mama, but are you sure about this approach? We could have simply bought the building and forced her out. Dante Romano, Isabella said sternly, using her son's full name the way she had when he was a child. That girl is innocent, and her father died protecting our secrets. We owe him better than to destroy his daughter's life. Dante stood and walked to the window that overlooked the city. At 32, he had been running the Romano crime family for 5 years, ever since his father's death. He was known for his strategic mind and his ruthless efficiency, but his mother was one of the few people who could still influence his decisions. The debt collectors will back off once they know she's under our protection, he said. But bringing her into our circle, even peripherally, puts her at risk. Isabella joined her son at the window. She's already at risk, Dante. The Volkov family has been asking questions about Victor's cafe. They suspect he hid something there before he died. Dante's jaw tightened. The Volkovs were a rival family that had been trying to expand their territory for months. If they thought Victor Martinez had hidden something valuable in the cafe, they wouldn't hesitate to tear the place apart to find it. Then we protect her, he said finally, but carefully. She can't know who we really are. Isabella smiled, knowing she had won this argument. The dinner will give you a chance to meet her properly. Just remember, she's not like the other women you've known. She's genuine, Dante, Try not to frighten her." Dante turned from the window and looked at his mother with amusement. "When have I ever frightened anyone?" Isabella raised an eyebrow and didn't dignify that question with an answer. Meanwhile, Elena was finishing her second cup of tea and feeling more excited about the future than she had in years. She looked at her phone and saw that it was nearly midnight. Technically, her birthday was over, but it had ended on a much better note than it had begun. She had no way of knowing that decision to open her door for Isabella Romano had just set in motion a series of events that would completely transform her quiet life. She couldn't have imagined that in less than a week, she would be standing in the private dining room of one of the most powerful families in the city, serving coffee to people whose names appeared in FBI files. And she certainly never could have predicted that the handsome man who would be watching her every move during that dinner would decide, in that moment, that she belonged to him. As Elena turned off the lights and prepared for bed, she felt grateful for the unexpected turn her birthday had taken. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new hope, and the chance to honor her father's memory by making Cafe Luna successful again. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, completely unaware that her life as she knew it was about to end. The week following Elena's meeting with Isabella Romano passed in a blur of preparation and nervous excitement. True to her word, Isabella's assistant had called the next morning with details about the family dinner. The event would be held at the Romano estate on Saturday evening, and Elena was to arrive at 6 o'clock to set up. Elena spent the entire week perfecting her menu. She decided on an elegant selection of Italian-inspired pastries, including cannoli filled with fresh ricotta, tiramisu cups, and delicate almond cookies her father had taught her to make. For the coffee service, she planned to bring her best Arabica blends and her portable espresso machine. What puzzled her was the location. When she looked up the Romano estate online, she found very little information. The property was listed simply as a private residence in the hills outside the city, with no photos or details available. The more she researched, the more mysterious the Romano family seemed to become. On Friday afternoon, while Elena was practicing her presentation for the 100th time, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Cafe Luna, this is Elena." "Miss Martinez?" The voice was deep, male, and carried an accent she couldn't quite place. "This is Victor Petrov. I understand you were close to Victor Martinez." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Something in the man's tone made her uncomfortable. "He was my father. May I ask who's calling?" "I'm sorry for your loss," the voice continued, though it didn't sound particularly sympathetic. "I was a business associate of your father's. I believe he may have left some documents that belong to me. I was wondering if I could come by the cafe to discuss this matter." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Her father had never mentioned any business associates, and she had gone through all of his papers when he died. There had been nothing unusual. Just cafe suppliers and utility bills. "I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about any documents," she said firmly. "My father only owned the cafe." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Perhaps you haven't looked carefully enough. These would be important papers, Miss Martinez. Important enough that certain people would be very unhappy if they remained missing." The threat in his voice was barely veiled, and Elena felt her heart rate increase. "I think you have the wrong person. My father was just a cafe owner." "I think you're mistaken," Victor Petrov said coldly. "I'll be in touch soon to arrange a time to search the premises. Good day, Miss Martinez." The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at her phone in shock. She tried to convince herself that it was some kind of misunderstanding. But the man's tone suggested otherwise. For the first time since her father's death, Elena felt truly afraid. She spent Friday night barely sleeping, jumping at every small sound in her apartment. By Saturday evening, she was exhausted and on edge. but she was determined not to let her fears ruin the catering opportunity with the Romano family. Elena loaded her supplies into her small van and drove to the address Isabella's assistant had provided. The Romano estate was even more impressive than she had imagined. The property sat on several acres of perfectly manicured grounds, and the main house was a stunning example of Mediterranean architecture with tall windows and elegant stonework. As she pulled up to the service entrance, Elena noticed several expensive cars parked in the circular driveway: black sedans, a silver Bentley, and what looked like an armored vehicle. She found it odd that a family dinner would require such elaborate security, but she reminded herself that wealthy families often took precautions against crime. A man in a dark suit approached her van as she began unloading her supplies. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of alertness that suggested military or police training. "Miss Martinez?" he asked politely. "I'm Marco. Mrs. Romano sent me to help you with your equipment." Elena accepted his assistance gratefully, though she noticed he seemed to be scanning the surrounding area constantly as they worked. Inside the house, she was led through a series of corridors decorated with expensive artwork and antique furniture. Everything spoke of old money and refined taste. The dining room where she would be serving was magnificent. A long mahogany table dominated the space, set with crystal glasses and fine china. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the gardens, and a massive fireplace crackled warmly at one end of the room. Elena set up her coffee station on a sideboard and arranged her pastries on elegant platters that Isabella had provided. As she worked, she could hear voices from other parts of the house, though she couldn't make out the words. "Miss Martinez?" Elena turned to find Isabella Romano approaching, dressed in a beautiful navy blue dress that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months. "Mrs. Romano, everything looks wonderful," Elena said, gesturing to the dining setup. "Thank you so much for the opportunity to cater for your family." Isabella's smile was warm, but Elena noticed something tense in her eyes. "Before the dinner begins, dear, there's something I need to tell you. My son will be joining us tonight, and he can be intense. Don't let him intimidate you." Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure what Isabella meant. Before she could ask for clarification, the sound of footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of the other guests. The first people to enter were an elderly couple, both impeccably dressed and carrying themselves with the confidence of wealth and power. They were followed by several other adults, all appearing to be in their 40s or 50s. Elena noticed that despite their elegant appearance, there was something sharp about their eyes, something that suggested these were not ordinary business people. Finally, a man entered who immediately commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Elena felt her breath catch as she saw him for the first time. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and intense brown eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. His suit was perfectly tailored, and he moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to being in control. This had to be Isabella's son, Dante Romano. He spoke quietly with several of the guests, his voice too low for Elena to hear. But when his eyes found her across the room, she felt as though the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. His gaze was penetrating and calculating, as if he were solving a puzzle just by looking at her. Isabella moved to her son's side and whispered something in his ear. He nodded slightly, never taking his eyes off Elena. The dinner proceeded smoothly, with Elena serving coffee and pastries as the family discussed what seemed to be business matters. She tried to be as unobtrusive as possible, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Dante Romano was watching her every move. When she approached his end of the table to refill his coffee cup, he spoke to her for the first time. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "My mother tells me you inherited your father's cafe." "Yes, sir," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Cafe Luna has been in my family for 15 years. And you're managing it alone now? There was something in his tone that made the question feel like more than polite conversation. Yes, I am. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her face. That must be challenging for a young woman. Running a business, dealing with creditors, handling difficult customers. Elena felt her cheeks warm. How did he know about her financial struggles? Every business has its challenges. Indeed, he said quietly. Some challenges require creative solutions. Before Elena could respond, one of the other men at the table called Dante's attention to something, and the moment passed. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that there had been hidden meaning in his words. As the evening wound down, Elena began cleaning up her station. She was packing the last of her equipment when Dante Romano appeared beside her. Allow me to help you with that, he said, reaching for one of her heavier cases. Thank you, but I can manage, Elena replied, not wanting to impose on the host's son. Dante ignored her protest and lifted the case easily. Walk with me to your van. It wasn't really a request, and Elena found herself following him through the corridors and out to the service entrance. Once they were outside and away from the other guests, Dante's demeanor shifted slightly. He seemed less formal, but somehow more dangerous. Miss Martinez, he said as they reached her van, has anyone approached you recently asking questions about your father? Elena's heart jumped. The phone call from Victor Petrov suddenly seemed much more significant. Why do you ask? Please answer my question. The authority in his voice was unmistakable, and Elena found herself responding before she could think better of it. A man called yesterday. He said his name was Victor Petrov, and he claimed my father had some documents that belonged to him. Dante's expression darkened immediately. What exactly did he say? Elena described the conversation, watching as Dante's jaw tightened with each detail. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Miss Martinez, he said finally, your father was involved in some complicated business relationships. There are people who believe he left behind information that could be valuable to them. What kind of information? Elena asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Dante studied her face carefully, as if trying to determine how much truth she could handle. The kind that could get you killed if the wrong people think you have it. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. I don't understand. My father owned a cafe. He served coffee and pastries. He wasn't involved in anything dangerous. Your father was a good man who got caught up in a bad situation, Dante said gently. But his past mistakes don't have to become your problems. Elena took a step backward, her mind reeling. Nothing made sense anymore. Who are you people? Dante moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. We're people who knew your father, and we're people who can protect you. Protect me from what? From men like Victor Petrov, Dante said. From people who think you know more than you do. Elena's hands were shaking now. I want to go home. I'm afraid that's not safe anymore, Dante replied calmly. Petrov's call means he's already watching you. Going back to your apartment or your cafe puts you at risk. Elena felt panic rising in her chest. You can't just tell me I can't go home? I don't even know you. Dante reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He showed her the screen, which displayed a text message with a photo attached. The photo showed Elena's apartment building taken from across the street. This was sent to me 20 minutes ago, he said. Petrov's people are already in position. Elena stared at the photo in horror. What do they want from me? They want what they think your father hid, Dante replied. And they won't believe you don't have it until they've searched every inch of your life. Tears began forming in Elena's eyes. I don't know anything about hidden documents or dangerous business relationships. I just want my normal life back. Dante's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, Elena saw something almost gentle in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but that life ended the moment Petrov decided you might be useful to him." Elena felt the last of her composure crumble. Everything she had thought she knew about her father, about her life, was falling apart around her. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. "You're going to come with me," he said. "You're going to let me protect you, and you're going to trust me to handle this situation." "I barely know you," Elena protested weakly. Dante's eyes seemed to pierce straight through her. "You don't have a choice anymore, Elena. As of right now, you belong to me." The possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver through her that was part fear and part something else entirely. Elena realized that her quiet, predictable life had just ended forever, and she had no idea what would take its place. Elena stared at Dante Romano in the dim light of the estate's service entrance, his words echoing in her mind. "You belong to me." The statement was so bold, so presumptuous, that for a moment she couldn't even respond. But as the reality of her situation began to sink in, fear gave way to anger. "I don't belong to anyone," she said firmly, her voice stronger than she felt. "And I'm not going anywhere with you." Dante's expression didn't change, but Elena noticed his eyes narrow slightly. "Miss Martinez, I understand this is overwhelming. But you need to understand the severity of your situation. Viktor Petrov is not the kind of man who accepts no for an answer." "Then I'll call the police," Elena said, reaching for her phone. Dante's hand covered hers before she could dial, his grip gentle but unmistakable. "The police can't protect you from what's coming, and some of them are already on Petrov's payroll." Elena jerked her hand away from his touch, disturbed by the way her skin tingled where he had touched her. "You're asking me to trust a complete stranger over law enforcement." "I'm not asking," Dante said quietly. "I'm telling you what's going to happen." Before Elena could respond, the sound of car engines from the front of the property caught their attention. Dante immediately moved closer to Elena, his body positioning itself protectively between her and the driveway. Marco appeared around the corner of the house, moving quickly. "Sir, we have a problem. 3 vehicles just pulled up to the main gate. They're not on the guest list." Dante's jaw tightened. "Petrov?" "Most likely," Marco confirmed. "Do you want me to turn them away?" Elena watched this exchange with growing alarm. The casual way they discussed potential threats, the obvious security measures, the expensive estate, pieces of a puzzle were starting to form a picture she didn't want to see. "Who are you people?" she asked again, though this time her voice was barely a whisper. Dante looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him making some kind of internal decision. "My name is Dante Romano, and my family has significant influence in this city. We handle problems that conventional methods can't solve." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She had heard whispers about families like the Romanos, rumors that circulated in certain neighborhoods about people who operated outside the law. "You're telling me I'm telling you that right now, we're the only thing standing between you and a very dangerous situation," Dante interrupted. "Your father knew this day might come, and he made arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Dante gestured to Marco, who disappeared back around the corner. "Before Victor Martinez died, he reached out to my mother. He told her about some documents he had hidden, documents that could destroy several powerful people if they fell into the wrong hands." Elena's mind was reeling. "My father never mentioned any documents. He was protecting you," Dante said. "He knew that the less you knew, the safer you would be. But Petrov's organization has been searching for those documents for 2 years, and they've finally traced them back to your father." The sound of voices from the front of the house was getting closer. Elena could hear Isabella Romano speaking in rapid Italian, her tone sharp and authoritative. "The documents?" Elena said suddenly. "Where are they?" Dante's expression was grim. "That's what everyone wants to know. Your father told my mother he had hidden them somewhere safe, but he died before he could reveal the location." Elena thought about the cafe, about all the hours she had spent there in the past 2 years. Had her father hidden something right under her nose? "You think they're at Cafe Luna?" "It's the most logical place," Dante confirmed, "which is why Petrov will tear the building apart looking for them. And if he doesn't find what he's looking for..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena understood the implication. Isabella Romano appeared in the doorway, her earlier warmth replaced by cold efficiency. "Dante, we need to leave. Now. Petrov is demanding to speak with Miss Martinez, and he has enough men with him to cause serious problems." Elena felt panic rising in her chest again. "What does he want with me?" "He wants to use you as leverage," Isabella said bluntly. "If he believes you know where the documents are hidden, he'll take you until you tell him what he wants to know." "But I don't know anything." "That won't stop him from trying to make you remember," Dante said darkly. Marco reappeared, slightly out of breath. "Sir, they're demanding entry. They claim Miss Martinez is here voluntarily and they just want to ensure her safety." Dante's expression turned lethal. "How many men?" "8 that I can see. Probably more in the vehicles." Elena watched as Dante seemed to transform before her eyes. The polite, controlled man from dinner was replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. This was a man who was accustomed to violence, she realized with a chill. "We go out the back," he decided. "Take her to the safe house on Elm Street." "I'm not going to any safe house," Elena protested, her voice rising. "This is insane." "You're all acting like this is some kind of movie." Dante turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her take a step backward. "This isn't a game, Elena. These men will hurt you to get what they want, and they won't hesitate to kill you once they're done. Your father died protecting those documents, and now that protection extends to you." "My father died of a heart attack," Elena said weakly. Isabella and Dante exchanged a look that told Elena everything she needed to know. Her father hadn't died of natural causes. The sound of footsteps on gravel was getting closer. Elena could hear multiple male voices, speaking in what sounded like Russian. "We're out of time," Marco said urgently. Dante made the decision for all of them. In one smooth motion, he scooped Elena up in his arms and started moving toward a side exit she hadn't noticed before. Elena started to struggle, but the firm strength of his grip and the urgent pace of their escape made her realize that resistance was futile. "Put me down," she hissed, not wanting to alert the approaching men to their location. "When we're somewhere safe," Dante replied, his voice calm despite the circumstances. They emerged into a garden area behind the house, where a black SUV was waiting with its engine running. Dante placed Elena in the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt before she could protest. Within seconds, they were moving down a gravel path that led away from the main house. As they drove, Elena could see lights and movement around the front of the Romano estate through the rear window. "What about your mother? Is she safe?" "My mother can handle Petrov," Dante said grimly. "She's been dealing with men like him longer than you've been alive." They drove in tense silence through winding roads that led away from the estate and toward the city. Elena's mind was spinning with everything that had happened in the past hour. Her safe, predictable world had been shattered completely. "Where are you taking me?" she asked finally. "Somewhere Petrov can't reach you," Dante replied. "At least not easily." Elena studied his profile as he drove. Even in the dim light from the dashboard, she could see the strong line of his jaw, the concentration in his eyes. Despite everything that had happened, despite her fear and confusion, she found herself noticing how attractive he was. The thought made her feel guilty and confused. You said I belong to you, she said quietly. Dante's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I said that to make sure you understood the seriousness of your situation. Is that all it was? He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. What do you think? Elena didn't know how to answer that question. Part of her was terrified of this man and everything he represented. But another part of her was drawn to his confidence, his obvious strength, the way he had positioned himself between her and danger without hesitation. They pulled up in front of a modest townhouse in a quiet residential neighborhood. Dante got out and came around to open Elena's door, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. This is a safe house, he explained as he led her to the front door. My people use it when they need to lay low for a while. Inside, the townhouse was comfortably furnished but clearly designed for temporary stays. Dante showed Elena to a bedroom on the second floor, complete with a private bathroom and windows that faced the back garden. You'll be safe here tonight, he said. In the morning, we'll figure out our next steps. Elena sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling drained and overwhelmed. I can't stay here indefinitely, she said. I have a business to run, bills to pay, a life to get back to. Dante leaned against the doorframe, his expression softening slightly. Your life as you knew it is over, Elena. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of your situation now. The question is, what kind of life you want to build moving forward? Elena looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or manipulation. What she saw instead was something that surprised her. Genuine concern mixed with something deeper, more possessive. Why are you helping me? She asked. Really? Not because of some debt to my father, but why are you personally involved in this? Dante was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with his answer. Finally, he stepped into the room and sat down in the chair across from the bed. When I saw you tonight, he said slowly, serving dinner to my family, trying so hard to be professional despite everything you were dealing with, I recognized something in you. What? Strength, he said simply. The kind of strength that doesn't come from violence or power, but from pure determination to survive and protect what matters to you. It's rare in my world. Elena felt her heart rate increase, though this time it wasn't from fear. That still doesn't explain why you're putting yourself and your family at risk for me. Dante stood up and moved closer to her, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Because the moment I decided you were under my protection, you became mine to protect. And I don't give up what's mine. The possessiveness was back in his voice, but this time Elena didn't feel frightened by it. Instead, she felt something warm and electric spread through her chest. I'm not a possession, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Dante reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. No, he agreed quietly. You're much more valuable than that. Elena knew she should pull away from his touch, should protest his presumptuous attitude, should demand to be taken home immediately. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly into his hand, drawn to the warmth and security he represented. What happens now? She whispered. Now, Dante said, his voice low and intense. You let me handle Petrov and his people, and you trust me to keep you safe. Elena realized that somewhere between the fear and the confusion and the adrenaline, she had started to do exactly that, trust him. It should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like the first solid ground she had found since her father's death. Okay, she said simply. Dante's eyes flashed with something that looked like surprise, mixed with satisfaction. Okay? Elena nodded, making a decision that she knew would change everything. I'll trust you, but I want to know everything. About my father, about these documents, about what we're really dealing with. Tomorrow, Dante promised. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we figure out how to end this so you can have a life again. What kind of life? Elena asked. Dante's smile was small but genuine. That depends on what you decide you want. As he left her alone in the bedroom, Elena realized that for the first time in years, she had options beyond just surviving day to day. They might be dangerous options, complicated options that came with risks she was only beginning to understand. But they were hers to choose. She looked out the window at the quiet street below and thought about the birthday that had started this entire chain of events. She had expected another lonely evening at her cafe, another night of worrying about bills and planning for an uncertain future. She never could have expected that opening her door for Isabella Romano would lead to this, to being claimed by a dangerous man who looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting, to discovering that her father had lived a secret life that was now threatening hers, to having her entire world turned upside down in the space of a single week. But as Elena finally allowed herself to relax for the first time in hours, she realized that despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt more alive than she had since her father's death. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, and decisions that would shape the rest of her life. For tonight, though, she was safe. And that was enough.